it is important for couples to know what the boundaries are of their relationship, and I think what their expectations and what their role is in a relationship. Now, I believe that is up to the couple to define.
Welcome to the Networking with Michelle podcast, the show dedicated to providing you with life strategies with a little bit of entrepreneur advice. Here we believe in the Jim Rohn quote, success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines practiced every day. Hey everyone, welcome to the Networking with Michelle show. I'm your host, Michelle Gomez. So this is part 2 of relationships and sex. Hey, yeah, that's where we're taking it. So hopefully you caught the episode on Monday, which was a conversation between me and Ebony. Now, for today's episode, I have Eliza Boquin on here, who's a relationship and sex therapist. And I actually posted on Facebook. I was like, hey, I'm interviewing a relationship and sex therapist. Do you have any questions and you're too afraid to leave a comment? Send me a direct message or text message me. And I literally posted that, took a nap, and I woke up to dozens of messages via Facebook and text. And I was truly overwhelmed. So this episode is really a lot of the questions I got from y'all, listeners of the show, as well as Facebook friends. And I was truly surprised by the number of questions as well as the type of questions I received. And I think anyone that knows me knows my whole thesis is based off of connection. And what I realized from those questions is that I provide a safe place for people to confide in me, right? And that's what I want the Networking with Michelle show to be. Whether it's you just listening and I'm able to bring different perspective, whether it's my solo show or how I ask questions to the guest. A lot of people I've met, obviously here in Houston, I've met people. I have friends that listen to the show. I've met listeners of the show here in Houston, so that's always rewarding. There's people that I've connected with online and that I chat with, literally 2-3 times a week, or maybe we jump online and have a quarterly call. Okay, I'm all about that connection. And I thank God that this show has allowed me to have that connection. And I really, really saw that with the questions that came to me a couple of weeks ago when I put it out there. And as I always say, this show's for y'all. And I know this can be a touchy subject, but if this is something that I need to do on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis, let me know. And I believe there's other business podcasts out there, very, better, similar, or better than mine, more established than mine. And there's those random questions that come up about, balancing marriage and family. I'm not there yet. We all know I'm single, but that's a struggle in itself. And there's not a lot of talk about that. But I'm actually seeing a trend how a lot of more business owners are talking about their current or recent divorce and how it's affected their business. And that's not what we want here, right? Yes, it happens. But what if we have the conversation before it gets bad? And I felt like that's what I was like. I don't know how to explain it. Like I was kind of already pushing the envelope, but then when I got the questions, I was like, wow. Like, this person's really sharing this with me, or I feel the same way, and I haven't had a chance to talk about it on the podcast. I could keep going. I could literally talk about this by myself for 45 minutes straight, but we're gonna leave that to our expert for today. But once again, let me know what you think. Reach out to me. Like, hey, Michelle, I like the episode. I like how you handle it. I don't like how you handle it. Let's talk about these topics. Can you do this on a regular basis? My podcast is for you. It's for the people. I'm here to serve. So just let me know what you think. Do we need more of this? Do we need more of this dialogue? And I'll be glad to deliver that for you. So without further ado, here we go. Hey, good people. Welcome to the Networking with Michelle show. Today's special guest is Eliza Boquin. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist and sex therapist, the good stuff. She specializes in relationships and sexual wellness. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
All right. So before people get a little...
Get a little.
Wait, what are they going to talk about?
What does she do?
Yeah, what do you do?
So I am a psychotherapist. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I have additional training in helping people with issues around sexuality, around their sexual health, sexual wellness. So it sounds a lot more scandalous than it really is.
How long have you been doing this?
I have been a psychotherapist now for 3 years, going into 4.
Okay.
Yeah, it's actually my second career in life. My undergrad and my previous life was marketing.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Okay.
But I always knew I wanted to be a therapist. Mm-hmm. But in my 20s and going through school, I was really impatient. And it was like, it's going to take me how long to finish? Yeah. But I have 3 children, and once my youngest had started kindergarten, I thought to myself, it's now or never. Like, my biggest fear is regret. Yeah. And I was like, I don't want to be 50 and say, I always wanted to be a therapist. So after 12 years, I went back to school. And
wait, so what's your undergrad degree in?
Marketing.
Mm-hmm. And then your grad degree?
Is in marriage and family therapy. Wow. Yeah, I have a master's in marriage and family therapy.
Okay. Yeah. Big leaps.
Yeah.
Okay. I may have to talk to you about some other stuff.
Yes, please.
Okay. What's the difference between a therapist and a psychotherapist?
Well, I'm a psychotherapist. So, I mean, sometimes people, when you just say therapist, they'll say, oh, are you a massage therapist, a physical therapist? Okay. Yeah. So psychotherapist, psychology, talk therapy, that's essentially what I do. Okay. Mm-hmm.
And then you're also partners, co-founder with Ebony, with Melanin
and mental health. Yes.
Helping those therapists that are people of color, promoting, like I would like to say, the agenda on how our people need help, professional help sometimes.
Yeah. So it's really Melanin and mental health is, it's the bridging of the gap between our communities and the mental health professionals. Because I think for so often, there's been like this wall where it seems inaccessible. It is inaccessible. And then it seems like it's not for us. And so what we're really committed to is, one, providing resources, information to help reduce the stigma around mental health for our communities. And then to help match them up, like now you have the information and now you're willing to give therapy a chance. Well, where are the therapists that are going to understand our experiences, who understand the nuances of our culture, our backgrounds? Who are they?
So for those that are listening,
I'm a Latina.
Yes. We'll say it one more time.
I'm a Latina.
Yes, okay.
That's how I move there and say I'm a Latina. Yes, I am.
I think, lots of times, obviously, I'm Black. I know what Black people do. And I know what we say and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of us, Black folk, we talk about, the generational curses or whatever, going back to slavery, What, as a Latina, what is your perspective when it comes to your community as a whole? Things that I probably won't even know because I don't have a lot of Latina friends.
Sure. Well, you have one.
Yeah. A lot. I have a few.
I am a lot, right?
Yeah. Okay. No, hey, she holding it down for everyone. I can take it.
So really, it's really interesting because, Latinos, Hispanics, and even within our own community, there are these divides, right? Because the experience of a Latino, or in some don't want to be called Latinos. Some I'm Hispanic. Or I'm whatever. There's so many divides even within the community, to where an experience for someone who is, let's say, a white Latina is going to be different than mine. Because I'm not, and so I think that's one of the challenges is we kind of all get lumped together. And my experience as a brown skinned Latina, that, when people will see me and they say, well, what are you? Right? Like, oh, I'm Mexican. Mexican. Yeah. Because I don't look what like I'm supposed to look like, why does your hair look like that? Or you're darker or what have you. And so how that impacted me, kind of trying to find like, well, where do I sort of belong? Right. And even like within, our own community, the talk around skin color and race, in addition to ethnicity. Right. So I can only speak to my experience and what that has been like for me, trying to kind of find my space within that, because of what I look like. Yeah. Right. That's kind of like what we talk about with melanin and mental health. It's like, the more melanin you got in your skin, the more issues and challenges you're going to be faced with that affect your mental health.
I didn't plan. I'm going to ask you a question. I didn't plan on this. Last year, there was the police shootings regarding Black men, or just, let me say, police brutality, different situations. And I did a 4-part series called Perspective of Black Lives. And I was actually looking for a Latino person. And I reached out to a few people, but I didn't get anywhere because that July last year, there was, I think, 3 police shootings targeted towards Hispanic men that didn't get, there was 1 or 2 articles on it, but obviously it wasn't brought to the forefront like Black Lives Matter. And I just wonder, like, is there a talk about that within your community, among your family or friends?
It's interesting because, again, we have these different challenges. For example, if you are first generation or you've been here for a while, and what you sort of, some people are very proud, and even within, again, Latinos, Hispanics that are just kind of grouped together if they're Spanish speaking or what have you, depending on their surname, then you have the different groups that they're Mexican, they're Puerto Rican, they're Dominican, and they kind of, so I know, like, my experience, there is a real sort of fear, for example, of authority. I can speak as a mother to my experience and my children, and I have 2 boys, and, one of them is more light skinned than the other one, and my middle son is more dark skinned. And I know the fear I feel around when you see him and you see a young teenage boy who's brown skinned and you trying to figure out what he is. And he's a little distracted and he's a little anxious, and how that comes across as disrespectful, and so it's a different conversation, I think. But I think the fear is what is common. It's like the not knowing, and just kind of knowing that you're targeted. And even within our community, we're targeted in different ways depending on what we look like.
Appreciate your honesty. Yeah. I guess, should I say get to the fun stuff?
The fun stuff. They're like, I thought they said they were going to talk about sex. They're bringing us down. Let's fast forward this part of the podcast. Sorry.
Hey, we talk about it all, right?
Yes.
The tough conversations.
Tough conversations all across the board.
So, I have a few questions. I posted on Facebook, and of course, no one was strong enough to leave a comment. So I got text messages and direct messages. So I just want us to, kind of go through some of these questions, and just see. Hopefully, people can appreciate the answers. I think I relate to this question as well. You're an entrepreneur, right?
I am.
You're an entrepreneur, therapist, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
As an entrepreneur, am I destined to be forever alone? And that's coming from a woman as well.
I guess I would need to know more. What do they mean? Like, for them, what does that mean? How is being an entrepreneur impacting their relationships? You know, does she mean because of the lack of time? Does she finding that the people that she's meeting are maybe intimidated by her success? Like, what does she identify as the real challenges?
That's a good question. I've said this a lot for myself. You know, with me, I have my blinders on. I could easily stay in my apartment for 16 hours working on something as I scroll through Facebook.
Right, yes.
You know, and if I do go out, I'm not even thinking about that romantic interest. You know, it's like I'm more than likely I'm out for a business networking event. I've also noticed as an entrepreneur, my conversation has changed, right? Because I'm also surrounded by other entrepreneurs.
Sure.
So I think those things have definitely played a part as far as me personally, my dating life going down. I can't speak. I know the young lady, but I can't speak for her so much. But I think as women, do we become too ambitious?
Ooh, ouch, right? How do we define too ambitious, and why are women, labeled as being too ambitious?
Yeah.
Like, how often do we say that about men?
But that's
right?
what we're attracted.
Yeah.
Well, most women are attracted to that.
Sure, but but part of it, the conversation is men are given permission to be ambitious. That's just sort of how they're socialized. Oh, it's in their DNA, I think what you're really talking about is balance, right? Like balance, being able to balance life. To say, I think, I get it. When you're an entrepreneur, like it's in your DNA, right? But it's still a matter of balance. Right. So and I see kind of like, what is she talking about with this?
I was like, does that exist? But okay.
I think what it is it's a constant having to check ourselves. Am I off balance today? Or am I in my apartment for 18 hours? And I know I am, and I still just can't get away from it.
Yeah.
Right. So is it being an entrepreneur, or is it I struggle to find balance in my life? Because you have some people who they're not entrepreneurs, but they might work for somebody else and still have that pull towards something, where other areas of my life are being neglected. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Because, I know when I was working corporate, I had plenty of time to walk the aisles of Whole Foods.
Sure. Smile at people. Sometimes you just invite by smiling. Hi.
And now it's like, I don't even have the desire. But I think, it is really about, okay, I got to do this work for this client because I need this done by this time to send this invoice to get this money in, versus where if I go clock in for 8 hours, 9 to 6, no overtime, and then I can, incorporate an activity or a happy hour and be carefree. Because there's times when I've gone out and I'm like, oh, I should be at home. Like I should be working on something.
But see, that's that gnawing feeling, right? It's that gnawing feeling, which I think then that requires us to do our work, right? Like, so what is the value that I'm placing on this and why? Right? Because I think that's the other thing. When you're an entrepreneur, there's always going to be something else to do.
So do you think women should be very proactive, aggressive, initiate when it comes to dating and marriage?
Do I think women should be aggressive, proactive? I think. See, I'm gonna.
Sorry, fellas. Sorry.
You know what? You're not gonna like me because I'm gonna like. Anytime you tell me I should be anything, I'm gonna be anything other than. I think all relationships for both men and women, a lot of it has to do with personality. It's this real sort of dance. I think you'll have men who say they appreciate, a woman who is more forward, and someone will say, no, I want to do all the work. Relationships, whether it be a same-sex relationship, heterosexual relationship, it's such a dance. Right. I think it's important for women and men, but we're talking specifically about women right now. I think it's important for women to know what they want. I think it's important for women to advocate for themselves, to be able to identify their needs, ask for their needs, and then also be able to be flexible, and that we're not going to get everything maybe on the list. But I think it's important for us to know what we want and then be able to ask for that in a relationship. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. All right. So next question.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do when your husband of 15 years does not support your career or business?
That's really tough. I think that requires some couples work, and that's my filter. But I would also be curious, has he been supportive of you and your growth in other areas of your life?
It's a good question.
What does she mean by support?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, what is she hoping what type of support does she need from him? Is she asking for it?
Mm-hmm.
Is he just not as excited maybe? Is the relationship taking a toll in some way? Are things off balance? But I would be really curious is how has he been supportive of her in other ways in the past?
That's a tough one because I feel like your career, that's such a big part of your life. Like if we break down the day in 24 hours, usually 8 hours of it is working. Yeah. Right. And if you're not supporting me in my daily,
Sure. Well, and again, I'd be curious as to what type of support do I need? Do I need emotional support? Is it that, I thought I was going to get a really good deal and I didn't, and now I'm in the dumps about it, and I wish I could talk to you about it and you help lift my spirits? Or is it, we're running a home together, we have children, and I need you to maybe do more around the home.
Yeah.
So what type of support does she need?
I'm going to skip around now. Okay. Are defined roles necessary to have a balanced relationship?
I'm going to say yes on this one. Okay. And what I mean by that is it is important for couples to know what the boundaries are of their relationship, and I think what their expectations and what their role is in a relationship. Now, I believe that is up to the couple to define. What works for you? Does it work for you, if you're in a heterosexual relationship that, the male is more the provider, or I don't know what that looks like. More traditional roles, or are you comfortable with sharing decision-making power? What does that look like for you? But I do think it's important to define those roles and those expectations within the relationship, because that also sets the boundaries for our relationship. And now the fun part is you get to decide what that looks like.
I guess how early do you have those conversations if you're in the dating phase? I think things come out over time, but too much too soon? Yeah,
too much too soon. I mean, you don't want it to be date one and be like, look, this is the role that you should have. Right. And I think it's tough to say. I don't know that there's really like a set date. But I think if you're holding back, I think there's a difference between hiding and pretending that you're someone other than who you are versus still having boundaries and deciding how much you're going to let the person in. So I'll give you an example. So, let's say I'm career driven and I'm me. I talk a lot, I talk fast, and I'm high energy. Yeah. And I meet you on the first date and I'm like, I'm just, I don't know if I really am interested. Yeah. That's different. Yeah. Versus, okay, how much am I going to reveal of myself? Versus hiding.
Oh, my God. Yeah. Anything about my life.
I didn't say it was easy.
No, I was, oh, my God. I was talking with someone. I have a financial background. Finance degree. I worked in banking and stuff for about seven years. So I'm very frugal. And I was, I don't know. I had this conversation with someone I was interested in, and he was like, just not good with money. Like,
he's not frugal.
And it's like, okay, well, maybe we have this conversation later, like maybe if I was more invested, obviously as time goes on, you're more invested.
Yeah.
But I was just like, oh, this is not going to work out. And then I guess for me, I saw that one big thing.
Yeah.
And then there was just the small things kept.
Then you're kind of going to support your hypothesis with everything that you do. See? He left that extra, But
I know money or managing money is very important to me, right? It's not necessarily making a lot of money because I don't consider myself to make a lot of money, but just, managing. And I was like, I don't think I could deal with this. And I'm older now, so I don't feel like I have that kind of time just to be, let me see how this goes. And I'm like,
well, I would also take it a step further because I think so much, especially when something really sort of activates us, is yes, it's about money, but what is the value behind money to you? Which it may seem obvious. Well, it pays my bills, but there's usually probably more behind that. Like, what does money represent to you?
Yeah.
And I think for some people that represents security, freedom, what have you. Then there might be some activation around that. Like, well, because I didn't have options here, or I didn't always have a certain level of freedom that I needed at a point in my life. So those are kind of the core issues and they get activated. And then it looks like, no, I'm really, 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 really like, and
I know me. I know me. And some of those core issues were discussed, but apparently it wasn't enough. Okay.
And sometimes it just, hey, it's not, not worth it,
All right, let's see. Do you think the expectation of a monogamous... do you think the expectation of monogamy ruins the relationship?
Only if your partner is not invested in monogamy also.
See how quickly she answered that? Pro tips.
Yeah. If your partner is not as invested in monogamy as you are.
I think with women, and I see this a lot among my friends, they tend to yield to the guy, right? So, and I think that hurts because it's like, if you're yielding to what he likes, when you're totally against it, like, at what point do you rise up to the occasion and speak up?
Sure, when do you advocate for yourself?
Right, right.
And I think, how are you defining monogamy also?
How many definitions?
Well, you'd be surprised what people consider cheating. For some people, yes, you would. So when we talk about monogamy, one person and cheating and going outside of that, well, for some people, cheating might be you're talking to someone on the internet. Like you were going back and forth with, an old, love.
Yeah.
And some people like cheating. Oh, they didn't have intercourse. They had outer course. It's not cheating because it wasn't inner, So how are they defining monogamy within the
Is that what we're getting to now?
This is not you. This is not 2017 type of stuff. But it's the expectations that people place on the relationship. And it's the expectations that they place on their partner, because I think there's a great book. There's a psychotherapist, author Esther Perel, and she talks a lot about this, about monogamy, in marriage, and sort of how we have this idea that our partner is supposed to be our everything, right? And just how challenging it is to be everything to anyone, right? Like, and then people will be married for a while and then, now it's boring. It's there's no passion in the relationship. And it's like, because you do everything together and you see them, doing their business in the morning on the bathroom. There's no novelty left, right? And so I think it's just the expectations. If you and your partner are on the same page about what your expectations are of a relationship, beautiful. If not, that's where are you talking about that?
No, because people don't want to have the tough
They
conversation.
don't want to have those. This is true.
Which would be if your spouse has a fetish or desire.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do you do if your spouse has a fetish or desire that they are not willing to fulfill?
Yeah, that's a lot of, that's part of the work that I do is how do we normalize some of this? Like what is throwing the couple off? I think just like with anything, you have to be on the same page. You never want to feel coerced or pressured into doing anything. And really a lot of the times these differences, particularly around sex, because there's so much shame around sex.
Yeah.
There's so much shame.
Yeah.
There's so much shame around, I would say, one, if your spouse is telling you about this fetish, that's actually a sign of their trusting you enough to share this part of them. So not shaming them. It might be difficult to hear, right? But if they're sharing with you and they're sort of like at least having the dialogue about like, where is this idea coming from, or tell me more. But I think because we're not given the language, we're not given the education, and we're not given the permission, I think, as women also, to really fully understand it, that it's scary. It can be really scary.
Yeah, I know one of my colleagues, he posted a video right after the season finale of Insecure, and I told him, I was like, based on the video, I was like, we need more women to speak up on how important sex is. And I think when more women start to speak up on it, it's a factor. When I don't know, when people say sex is not important, I'm like, you're lying to yourself, and there's no need. You have no reason to lie to me. Yeah. But I think that's what I loved about Insecure this season. With me already being a fanatic, it's just that it addressed a lot of issues regarding sex and sexuality.
Absolutely.
At least I start to have start the conversation. It's only a 30-minute show, so can't go in depth too much. But in my opinion, one of the underlining themes was, in this case, women want to have sex.
Sure. Yes,
however, they will like to have it, whatever, how broad those, And I don't think people picked up on that though.
I think we're still at this point where it's women, it's sort of like we are socialized and we're raised to not be sexual, right? From being young girls, we can't even call a young girl's body parts by their proper names. That's your hoo-ha. That's your vajayjay. And then, that's not even your vagina. That's your vulva. Yeah. And it's like, oh my God, why does she know that word? Because she knows that this is her nose and she knows that these are her ears. So just that alone disempowers us. I can't even tell you I can't even name my body parts, let alone maybe even tell you how they work. So that's just basic body parts. Now add to that pleasure. I don't know about you, but how much conversation did you get about pleasure is a good thing? No. Right? Young girls are shamed for that. And then it's sort of like save yourself and all this other conversation. I'm not saying you should or you shouldn't. I'm just saying that there's a lot of shame. And then as adults, it's sort of like now whatever you do is sort of for the pleasure of your partner versus necessarily your own pleasure. Yeah. So I don't think women are empowered when it comes to even talking about sex, even just feeling empowered about our bodies and our own pleasure. So it's difficult. It's difficult to have those conversations.
It is difficult. Because if I think mentally, if a woman does feel empowered about having sex or we'll just say sexuality as a whole, and however she decides to express that, it's like she's a hoe or she's a slut. Right. And then you
like when you have sex? Have it, but do you like it? Like, oh my God.
Right. Or you did this and that and
and you enjoyed it?
Yeah. And then maybe in this case, you have Issa and Molly, you know, maybe you have that one or a few friends that, you know, don't judge you. It's a no judgment zone, but it's like you're getting the judgment of everyone else. And it's hard to deal with that.
It is difficult to deal with it. Again, I still don't think people are comfortable when a woman owns her sexuality or is comfortable discussing sex, let alone a woman of color. You know, add that to the mix.
Yeah.
You know?
But then we are sexualized.
And exactly, but not for our enjoyment purposes.
Yeah.
See, you may be objectified or sexualized, but that's not. So your sexuality, your body, your pleasure is not for your purpose.
It's not for me.
Right.
Have you read the book or heard the book, Your Brain on Sex?
I've heard of the book. I can't say I've read it.
Yeah, so I've read half of it, and it's pretty good. I think the most interesting thing is that it talks about how, like everything you do sexually pretty much stems from childhood, or like how you're raised from from your family. But then, because she's a therapist, I'm poor about authors, but she's a therapist, so she goes through these stories with her clients, and she mentions these stories on how, you know, whether it's a guy or a girl, how the person they marry is pretty much, you know, to the T on paper, you know, great qualities, but then they have these sexual desires, and like that's why people cheat, because it's like, yeah, we look good together, our family wants us together, but there's things that I want to do. You're not. I told you you're not comfortable, or I'm going outside, and it's going through these scenarios where it's either a woman is sleeping around a lot. You know, this is why she likes the bad boy type, because they could fulfill her sexually, versus her dating the lawyer that she works with at the same firm. Or it's just a fascinating book, in my opinion. It talks about the abandonment issues, and how that translates into the bedroom. And I was like, oh, I'm learning a lot by myself.
Yeah. You know, what's really interesting, I think when it pertains to sex, is we want to make sense of sometimes things that just don't make sense. And I think as it pertains to sex, that's especially true, because if we have any thoughts or desires that go anywhere outside that neat little box that has been, you know, assigned, then it's like, oh my goodness, what's wrong with me? It's automatically, we pathologize it and we want to make sense of it. Like, surely there has to be like a really deep rooted issue, because otherwise, what does that say about me? Because of all the shame around sex. And I think what we fail to sometimes understand is, in addition to all of these other layers and parts of us, we're also sexual beings. And I think the reason that trips us up is because when we think of sex, we're only thinking of an act, right?
Yeah,
like, oh, that's what do you mean we're sexual beings? What do you mean you're born a sexual being? No, it just means you are a sexual being. You have sexual parts. You have sexual desires. You have sexual responses that are just part of being human. But you hear sex, and I think that's what trips people up when you say, have you talked to your children about sex? You know, because they're just thinking of an act that is also limited to penetrative intercourse between heterosexuals, couples, you know. And sex, part of the work that I do is helping people to really redefine and expand their definition of sex, and to understand you're also a sexual being. Like, you have this aspect of you, and so your sexual health is part of your overall health, like your mental health, like your physical health.
So in that case, can nature versus nurture go beyond same sex? Because usually, in my opinion, that's when you would hear it. Like, is it nature versus nurture as to why this person is homosexual? Wouldn't that encompass anyone? Like,
say more about that, because I'm definitely not of the, you know, I'm. So tell me more, so I can understand what you mean by that question.
Just making it up as I go. Well, I think, you know, from my experience, right, my limited experience, from what I read or have read, usually when it says nature versus nurture, it's referring to why this person is gay.
Oh,
right?
Okay.
But when I'm listening to you speak, we're all sexual beings. Wouldn't nature versus nurture still apply, but on a broader sense, not necessarily on how I identify, but just me as a person?
I think it goes back to this idea that we want people to be all one thing. We want people to have, if you are a girl, you like boys.
Right.
That's it.
Right.
What do you mean you find that girl attractive? Whew, and so I think it goes back to, again, there's this need to fit people into a box. And I don't believe in that. I don't believe that we're all one thing of anything. And I think there's so much fluidity to us. It just makes people really, really uncomfortable. They want to make sense of anything that doesn't fit into their box of comfort, if that makes sense.
Can guys be fluid?
Absolutely. They can be fluid, but they're not allowed to be fluid. You see what I'm saying? Like, if you see a woman who is more fluid with her sexuality, that's hot, right? But then if men talk about having a more, no, that's not me. Like, no way, right? Yeah. They're just, it's, that's the flip side of how we're socialized. And it's just not how it works. That's just not how our sexuality works. And that might get pushed back. That's how mine works, right? Might have people say that, but it's just, humans are just so much more complex than that.
How important is it to find your own community? Because sexuality, it seems like it can be very simple for some. It can be complex for others, right? Obviously, the heteronormal agendas, pushed.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how important is it to find your community, whether it's polyamory, BDSM, swingers, I don't know,
I think
LGBT.
Anything that, let me take that back. I think having a community is important across the board for all of us because humans are wired for connection. We are just wired to connect with other humans and have our little sort of tribes. And it is essential to our overall well-being, to our mental health, to be able to connect with others that you feel accepted, you feel understood, you feel connected to. And so I think it's essential to all of our well-being to have community and to be validated and to be seen, like for whoever you are. I think that's when we're not, that is the root of so much suffering. Whether it be in your families, because you're not accepted, you're outcast. They've done a lot of studies around when there is this fracture between the connection that you have with other humans, how that impacts our mental health, and the healing benefits of being connected to others. So community, I think, is everything.
All right. So many directions I can go. Oh, man.
Some tough questions here. I like it.
All right. Let's see. Any tips on long distance relationships?
Lots of, again, I think for any relationship, but especially long distance relationships, is going to be a conversation around boundaries and a conversation around expectations, right? Tips as far as what? Like as far as making it work, as far as...
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I think, well, I have my own views, but I'm not the professional.
Well, but here, I will say this. I may have a degree and I might have training, but I'm not the end all be all, right? If you go to a therapist and they tell you I'm the end all be all, like run. Like I'm not the end all be all, and this doesn't apply for everyone.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, I think, obviously money can be an issue, right? So in state, out of state. Yeah. Obviously there's pluses of technology are concerned, but it's like, out of 4 weekends, am I going to see you 1 or 2 weekends? And how are we alternating? And all that.
How do we stay connected? I think is the question for every couple.
Yeah.
Is what I see is How do we stay connected? How do I know like you're there for me? And that's the tough part for any couple to decide. But when you're doing the long distance work, is having those conversations again about what is the expectation, and it's going to require that much more effort to stay connected. Is that FaceTiming? Is that, I think I saw like, how do you stay together in, intimacy wise?
Yeah.
Technology has gone a long way. So there's all kinds of fun stuff that you can do, to stay connected intimacy wise.
I've had a few friends that have gone through this. How do you handle verbal abuse?
How do you handle verbal abuse? That's a therapist in me, because if I had someone in session like, so what does that mean? What do you mean by handling it? Does that mean, do I get out of it? Abuse, not just someone having a bad day. I mean, you handle abuse. If you're in a relationship that is abusive, I think just even recognizing that is abusive is difficult, but definitely getting some support around that. I don't know, is your partner willing to do some work with you? Mm-hmm. Do they see it as abusive? Does the partner see that they're being abusive? I think really having a support system for that person who is being verbally abused is going to be really important. Information, resources. The thing is, when you're in a relationship, you're so inside it. You're so that sometimes it's difficult to even see what's going on. Yeah. And I think what often happens when people are in abusive relationships is they begin to get isolated. The other partner may begin to isolate them from that support system. There's a reason for that. Because when you have people who care about you, they're going to look at you and they're going to say, hey, you don't have to do this. And so they'll cut them off from their support system. And so building a support system that, be it through therapy, friends, if they're part of a church or what have you, that's going to be really essential, because I think getting out of an abusive relationship is a process. It sometimes takes a lot of time.
What about recovering from sexual trauma?
Oh, yeah.
I went to an event on Friday, and unfortunately, the lady was raped when she was a teenager. She thought she was okay, got past it, eventually got married. But when it came time to, have sex with her husband, now it's like triggers were coming up. And unfortunately, she got divorced, and now she's in her second marriage. But sometimes I think, once again, going back to people of color, we underestimate the power and the benefits of therapy. Yeah. And even though we're in a relationship, it's like those triggers can still come up from a trauma.
Yeah. Trauma is a really tricky thing, because it really affects us, not just on an emotional level, like, oh, that made me sad. No, trauma, it affects us neurologically. It gets stored in your body responds a certain way. So if there's been a sexual trauma, getting the help of a professional is really ideal. Now, that's not always realistic for people. So there's a lot of resources, and I can give you some and you can list them. But even if it means just starting out with a book, like I'm looking at one right now that is a great book. It's called The Courage to Heal. And so maybe that's where you're at. You start by looking at a book and, oh, wow, like that's me and that happened to me and that's my story, right? Being able to connect with something that will put you on the path to healing. Because when it comes to trauma and being violated, it is more than just, I'm going to just suck it up and move on, which is the narrative way too often.
What are some things that I guess men can do? Because yes, men can be abused and raped.
Absolutely.
We don't hear about it as much.
Absolutely.
But I know I definitely have men that listen to the show. So what can they do to support their sister, girlfriend, wife, or maybe even a mother that has been abused? Because I also feel like when it comes to, I guess, lack of a better word, feminist movement, we actually need more men to step up and speak up on a lot of the women issues.
Absolutely.
For it to resonate.
Absolutely. So if you're a man and your partner has been sexually abused, I think part of it is you getting more information. Because what can happen is, let's say they're responding a certain way, is they might begin to personalize it. Like you're personalizing this behavior. So getting information and resources and educated on what this looks like and what might happen after the trauma. How can you be a support system in their healing? But I think it just starts with getting as much information as they can to somewhat understand what their partner, what their spouse might be going through.
All right, so go back to my favorite show.
Yes.
One or two.
Yes.
Insecure and Power. But Insecure.
Yes.
The open marriage, right?
Yes.
And just so much to say.
Deep sigh. That was such a deep sigh.
Yeah, because I think, I have a lot of views on stuff. But I think everyone's trying to critique the situation, right? And I think I was actually kind of like pro Molly in the situation. And I think what people fail to realize is, one, we don't know if Dro was lying or not. We don't know. Okay, that's
a good liar. He was.
That's up in the air. But I was like, y'all got to keep in mind, like, this is her friend. This is a childhood friend that she grew up with. And once again, sex is important.
Yes. Yes, it is.
So, I don't know, open marriage. I think a lot of people are in an open marriage and they don't know about it. That's not good. But I think
then it's not a true open marriage.
Okay, it's not.
It goes back to remember when we were talking about how you define monogamy.
Very, very true. But I think it's more common. I'm meeting more people that are stating that they're in an open marriage. I also believe that type of information is shared when you're comfortable with someone. It's so much.
I think kind of my thoughts on that or rather, it's people have a misconception about polyamorous couples. And that is that it's just kind of this free for all. No boundaries, and it's not. Like true polyamorous relationships, there is a tremendous amount of conversation and talk about limits and boundaries. Like there are limits and boundaries, and I think that's what trips people up is because I'm going to sound like a broken record. We keep wanting to go back to fitting relationships into looking like this in this box where it's boy, girl, nice, neat little box where they have penetrative intercourse and make babies and live happily ever after. And anything that doesn't fit into that, there's no way that, people are like, there's no way that could possibly work. There's no way that they could possibly be happy. There's no way they could possibly have values and morals and like, what is this, right? And yet it happens every day where people are able to negotiate their relationships that often when what you will find when people have certain relationships where, again, it's truly a polyamorous relationship, there's a tremendous amount of respect and conversation and negotiating that is involved with that sometimes people in monogamous relationships don't have these conversations.
Very true. I think the thing is when and how do you evolve into that, right? I
think this is the other thing. You understand that there's other things that work. If it doesn't work for you, don't get in a polyamorous relationship, right? Like, then that's not for you. It's not, but to understand that it does work for some people. How do you get into that? I think it is, again, a tremendous amount of understanding what your expectations are. So, for example, if we were going to use Molly and Dro, what are Molly's expectations of entering this relationship with Dro? Does she think he's going to be available like whenever? Like is she going to be able to see him on all the major holidays? What are her expectations getting into that? Because that's part of the thing is they're having a lot of hot sex, but they haven't really had conversations around like, okay, if we're going to do this, what is that going to look like?
Yeah, because he's always seducing her.
Well, but I think we want to paint him as just the villain, right?
Yeah,
but he's telling her, right? Like he's telling her, and so again, as women, we have to own our role also in these relationships. We again, each partner, not just the women, has to own what we bring to a relationship. And the table of our relationship, what are we contributing to it? Is it strengthening it? Is it keeping us stagnant? Or is it weakening it?
A lot of people they're not going to want to answer that question.
They never want to do that. It's much easier to say, if this person would just change X, Y, Z, we'd be good. We never want to take that mirror and say, oh, yeah, there's some things that maybe I could be doing. That's the real work. That's the real work.
That's why I started seeing my therapist.
That's the real work.
So do you think Molly, because she has this friendship with both of them, like, do all three people need to sit down and have a conversation, or do you take the word of one person that you meet? Like,
so polyamorous relationships, there's conversation. Anybody who's involved, everybody knows who's involved.
Yeah.
We all are able to have these conversations. Yeah. We all negotiate these conversations. And so what trips people up is there's more than two people in it. Right? Like what? Because, and I think that's because so many people have trouble doing that in just two people relationships. Have you discussed your expectations about what you think is going to happen when you get married? What? No. So if two people can't do it, how could possibly three or four people, right? Like it just seems, oh my goodness, that just is not possible. Yeah. But it goes back to what is my expectation of marriage or commitment, or you're my boyfriend or you're my girlfriend or you're whatever.
Anything else? Open marriage?
I think, again, if it doesn't work for you, don't get in one, right? And you're not in an open marriage if you think you're in a monogamous relationship. That's different. That's again, it's all about boundaries. It is all, and some people, if you can think of it, if you go kind of inward and say, people have different boundaries. For example, I'm very open. I'll see somebody, hey, how you doing? I'm boundaried, but I'm not maybe as boundaried as I have friends who are like, I don't want to look and say hi to that person. Yeah. And so boundaries in your relationship is the same thing. What works for you and who's ever in that relationship with you.
Okay.
And that takes self-awareness.
I'm all about self-awareness. I am pro self-awareness. And if you listen to all 100 episodes, you know how I feel about self-awareness. Yes. I just think, I think it's a combination of things. Like I mentioned it earlier, I think a lot of women yield, and then women think they can change a man. Or once I get them, and I'm like, okay, it's one thing if you're in your 20s and you're like, oh, okay, I'm down for whatever, and it's like, okay, now you're 30 with a child, and you're like, I don't want this fun / open marriage thing, whatever going on anymore, and like kind of like cycling through those transitions.
Yeah, I think part of it is. In your, like, let's say if you're married for X amount of time, or if you're not married, you're just with somebody, your relationship's going to change. Yeah. It's going to change. I would hope it would change. I hope you're not the same person at 19 that, at 39 that you were at 19. And so it's going to change. And so that is why self-awareness and doing our personal work is so important. Because as you go through those changes within a relationship, there's going to be 3 things that can happen. And that is, the goal is we're going to change and we're going to grow. And hopefully we're going to be going like this in the same direction, maybe at different speeds, but we're growing in the same direction. But what can also happen is I'm going to grow. I start growing this way. And then this person says, don't go that way. Get back here. So I hold back my growth. Yeah. Okay. And then I'm there. I'm like, okay. Now I'm resenting this person. Or I'm going to grow this way and you're going to grow that way. And we grow apart.
Yeah.
So ideally, we're growing together in the same, and so that requires ongoing conversation, work, effort, energy, nurturing, attention, and self-awareness of where I am now and what I'm bringing to this relationship. Because I can tell you what you're not bringing, but can I tell you what I'm not bringing?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the tougher part. That's the tougher piece. I don't want to tell you what I'm not bringing. I'm just focus on what you're not bringing.
I think she's over here getting my life. Lord have mercy. Oh, Lord. Okay. I want to circle back on something. Because I mentioned defined roles.
Mm-hmm.
Are defined roles necessary?
Mm-hmm.
And the person that sent me the question, she's actually, she's bisexual,
mm-hmm.
but I want us to focus on same-sex relationships or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, how do you help the same-sex couples,
mm-hmm.
and what capacity do you work with those couples?
How do I help them? And so all my couples, and I work with same-sex, heterosexual, polyamorous relationships. I work with all couples, and it really goes back to the same thing with all of my couples, all of my clients, even when they come in individually. And that is, what are your goals? What is your goal for what is your goal for therapy? What is your goal for your relationship? Because here's the thing, I'm not going to define those goals for you because I don't know what works best for your relationship. I don't know. I might have, again, these licenses, but you're the expert of your life. Yeah. And the decisions you're going to make, you're going to live with them when you go home. So what I'm going to offer you is the process on how to get there. So maybe so again, if I have, whether I have a same-sex couple that comes in and they say we're struggling because there's a lack of intimacy in the relationship, emotional and sexual. Okay, so what are we working towards? Because it's especially interesting with couples. And I find that whether we have a same-sex couple or heterosexual, they come in with different goals. Yeah. Right? Well, one person wants this and the other, and then we're not getting there. And it's like, well, the therapist must suck. It's like, wait, you got different goals. You're not even working towards the same thing. Yeah. So when it comes to my same-sex couples, it's the same as it would be with my heterosexual couples. What are we working towards here? And how are we getting in our own way? How am I, not how is my partner, how is my spouse blocking us from getting to that goal? How am I blocking us from getting to that goal? Because that's where the true power lies. It's also tougher to get there, right?
Dealing with yourself.
Dealing with self, no matter what, who you are. Does that answer your question?
It does. It does.
I see your wheels turning.
It is. I think it's complicated.
You know what? The funny thing is, it's complicated and then it's not. Yeah. Right? Because I think when it comes to relationships, what makes it complicated is we're so in the other person's business. And what I mean by business is we're so in trying to correct them. Yeah. Right? Like you just, if you just stop breathing like that.
Me, you can get along.
If you would just clip those coupons.
Like I told you. And put away that 20% each time, this would be beautiful. Right? And maybe it would, maybe it wouldn't. But it's rare that I say, if I would just, maybe be a little more flexible. If I just wasn't as defensive. If I was maybe a little more vulnerable in my relationship, this would be great. We don't do that. Typically. Because I get a lot of slack. You're like, Michelle, what are you looking for? I was like, I just want someone to cooperate.
See? Define cooperate. Right? Define. That's what I was saying. When people tell me, I just want to be happy. Well, what does that mean? What does happy look like for you? What does cooperation look like for Michelle? I say eat to do, and then you do it.
not even. Just, self-sufficient.
And what does self-sufficient mean? See, we're getting somewhere here. Don't ask me for nothing.
First person to challenge me on this. Now I gotta tap into. No, I guess cooperate, right? I know I'm the person, like, I want to be taken care of, right? So there's things that need to be taken care of. We talked about, obviously, my stance on money. That is very important to me. So making sure that the bills are paid, right? And
valid concerns,
right? But and I say that, like, being paid comfortably, right? Not struggling, and able to enjoy family and friends, birthday celebrations, and those things that come up comfortably. Also, great conversation. Hopefully enjoying the same things when we go out, whatever fun activities may consist of. But I've been told have high standards.
You have high standards because you want the bills paid, you want them to talk? There's probably more to it.
I mean, this one young lady, she's like, Michelle, you're too deep. And I was like, what? It's like, she's like, you're too deep. And I was like, that I've never been, like, ever since she told me that, haven't been able to let that go. I'm like, what does that mean?
Well, what did you say for her to say you were too deep?
I don't remember anything before or after that conversation.
Why do you think that stuck out for you?
Because I'm definitely cerebral, right? So, I would like to, have great conversation with whomever I decide to be with.
So you don't want to just have great conversation. You want to be kind of challenged a bit into learning from that
challenge, person. Connected. So it's always that balance where, like, it's like I want someone smart, right? But then when they're smarter than me, it's a little bit intimidating.
Makes you vulnerable. Like, you don't want to be vulnerable in the relationship. You're like,
no, but I think I'm okay with that. I think obviously I've spent 6 years in therapy, so I wasn't,
as vulnerable.
But I think now I've definitely seen growth in myself and just self-awareness and the experiences that I've had. But it's so much. It's timing. I have those moments where I feel like, okay, I'm ready. I could date, and I may start dating. And then something something personal comes up, and I'm like, and I'm honestly, my ego is tied to my money, right? So if my money's not right, it's just hard for me to focus on anything else. And it's like,
well, I think you answered your own question. Your ego, which is often synonymous with our worth, is tied to my money. So then what is that about for you? That your worth is tied to your money. Because your worth shouldn't be tied to anything exterior.
You're not going to invoice me on this, are you?
Yeah.
And like, I know that, and like, I know that, but it's just so hard
in here.
It's so hard to like remove myself from that.
Sure.
And I guess, subconscious is like, how can I have a good time when I don't know if this is going to get paid? Right. Or, and it's not even necessarily the money coming out of my pocket, but, it's just, I don't know. I've always been like that.
Well, it sounds really though too like this need for security and predictability, and
definitely
right. And so really feeling rooted and grounded, which you're associating with the money, right? Which most of us do, but how much of that then, going back to the vulnerability piece, is when you begin to feel vulnerable in different ways. Right. Which in relationships, man, intimacy, sex, everything that we've talked about is contingent upon vulnerability.
Right.
It is the ability for us, whether it's I've enjoyed a really great conversation or I just had some great sex, it's in my ability to let go.
Right.
to let go, be vulnerable, and there has to be a certain level of safety in that. But it also requires a certain level of trust within myself. Like if I'm going to sit down with Michelle and I'm going to talk, we know what we're going to talk about, but okay, we're going to flow with it.
Thank you.
Right? But I have to trust that that I have it within me. Yeah. So vulnerability is key to intimacy. And so with you, it keeps showing up with the money. And that may just be something that I'm going to talk about. You can have to keep talking about it in therapy, but that's, I think, with where the real work is, because it's showing up as the money, but there's probably more underneath.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the overall provision, right? The overall provider, right? Because even growing up, my mom took care of me and my brother, single mother, and my parents are from Cameroon, West Africa, right? So this I love yous and the emotion is not there, right? But I consider myself to be, I want to say, great at intimacy, being vulnerable and all that type of stuff. But yeah, like my mom, it's like she probably physically didn't show up, right? And we didn't exchange the I love yous and the hugs and all that kind of stuff. But I've learned not to do that. Like I am a hugger. I am a talker.
How did mom show up for you though?
Oh, she brought me anything I wanted.
So you see that right there.
Yeah.
It's already so, there's so much of what we tie, into our experience with our family of origin. It's like really sometimes going, and sometimes it's a lifetime process of us learning ourselves. Even me as a therapist, I'm a proponent of therapy. I have my own therapist, and doing my own family of origin work, and how different, because our parents do the best they can and they still drop the ball in some places, right? And so really understanding where they drop the ball is, I think, important. And sometimes it's difficult for us because I don't want to blame my parents. No, it's not about blaming. It's about understanding. Children's emotional well-being and health is so neglected.
Yeah, it is.
It's sort of like, you had food and you had this and you had
the basics, but it's so much deeper. It's
absolutely. It also impacts our development. Yeah. And so, I had a moment in my own session where it's like, I'm a therapist. I read therapist books. So I know what she's asking. I know what she's getting to. And I had this moment of insight and I was like, whoa. I've done my own therapy. I'm a therapist. I read therapist books and I'm so in it, I don't see it. Yeah. And but look how it's still impacting me today. Yeah. And so sometimes that's tough for us to see. That's why it's tough for us to let go of what has become our survival mechanisms. Yeah. Yeah. Don't get me started. Yeah. And
I've been very fortunate to, what I like to say is, learn from my parents' mistakes. Like whatever I guess they didn't do, I've done the opposite. And I think because of that, I'm just a little bit better off in some regards.
Just kind of, each generation. And, sometimes it's so embedded in us that it's tough for us to see though too.
I see it and I don't like it sometimes. Oh Lord. What else? What else do we have to put on the table? Final words?
I think, final words and kind of what we've been talking about with sexuality and mental health, and we went all over the place.
We did. We had some good questions. I threw in a few.
You did. I think the overall theme is healing, right? Healing and growth. And so much of our pain and our suffering, whether it be in our romantic relationships, whether it be with our sexuality, struggling with our sexuality and understanding our sexuality, an expression of our sexuality and feeling accepted, there's a lot of healing that I think that still needs to be done within our communities. That even today, we are not necessarily empowered or given permission to be able to seek out that healing, because we kind of wear these capes of resilience and strength and keep going and, martyrdom and all of that I think one of the strongest things that we can do for ourselves and is essential I think individually and collectively in our communities for us to grow is going to be very active, for us to be very active in our own healing, whatever that looks like, be it therapy, be it church, be it spirituality, be it nature, whatever that path is, to begin to explore that for ourselves.
How can people find you?
People can find me at trswc.com. That is my private practice. I'm in Houston, Texas. They can go to melaninandmentalhealth.com also. I'm on social media, TRSWC of Houston, Melanin and Mental Health, and they can contact you because I'm your only Latina friend.
That indeed.
Yes.
Or you can stalk me on Facebook, scroll down and find, absolutely.
Yes.
But we'll definitely have those links in the show notes.
Yes.
I thank you.
Thank you.
This is great.
Yay.
This is great. Hey, everyone, remember, I believe in you. Personal connection leads to an influential network. Thanks for networking with Michelle.